a 23-year-old girl, a devout Catholic, a university student who loved her family. She didn't disappear. She didn't vanish into thin air. She died in her childhood bedroom in Bavaria, Germany, while 2 Catholic priests stood over her and prayed. And what happened in the 10 months before her death? That's what no one can fully explain. Anneliese Michel was born in 1952 into a deeply religious family in Klingenberg, a small town in West Germany. She attended Mass twice a week. She was described by everyone who knew her as kind, obedient, and warm. By all accounts, she was completely ordinary. Then, when she was 16 years old, she blacked out at school. She walked around in a daze for several minutes, with no memory of it afterward. A year later, it happened again, and this time, her body went into violent convulsions. The diagnosis came quickly: temporal lobe epilepsy. Medication was prescribed. Life, it seemed, would go on, but it didn't. By the time Anneliese was 20, something had shifted. She began hearing voices, dark, threatening voices that the medication couldn't touch. She became unable to look at crucifixes. She would walk past a religious statue and physically recoil, like something inside her was in pain. She told doctors she could smell something burning, something that wasn't there. She was moved to a psychiatric ward. She took her pills every day. Nothing improved. In fact, year by year, it got worse. And then came the moment everything changed. She looked at a priest and told him she could see demons, and she described them by name.
I know exactly what is coming.
In 1975, after years of failed psychiatric treatment, Anneliese requested something that no doctor could prescribe: an exorcism. A priest named Ernst Alt visited her and was convinced, genuinely convinced, that what he was witnessing was not mental illness. He wrote a detailed report to the local bishop. The bishop, after reviewing the case, did something extraordinary. He granted secret permission for a formal Catholic exorcism. Total secrecy was ordered. No press, no outside knowledge. What happened inside that house was between the priests, the family, and whatever was in that room. The sessions began in September 1975. Over the next 10 months, 67 exorcism sessions were performed, 1 or 2 per week, each one lasting up to 4 hours. During the sessions, Anneliese spoke in voices that were not her own. She growled, she shrieked, she screamed in multiple languages, she barked like a dog for days on end. She claimed the demons inside her were Lucifer, Judas, Nero, Hitler, and others, each with a different voice, a different presence. She broke her knees from dropping to pray so many times, but continued kneeling anyway. She stopped eating. She told the priests she was going to die, that it was her destiny to atone for the sins of the modern world. And she seemed at peace with that. Her parents watched, the priests prayed, and no one called a doctor. By the summer of 1976, Anneliese weighed 68 pounds. Her lips were cracked from dehydration. Both of her knees were shattered. She had developed pneumonia. She hadn't eaten in weeks. And still, the exorcisms continued, because everyone around her, including Anneliese herself, believed she was in the final battle against the demons inside her. On July 1st, 1976, Anneliese Michel died in her sleep. She was 23 years old. Experts later testified that she could have been saved with basic medical care, even just 1 week before her death. But no one had called for help, and by the time they did, it was already over. Her parents and both priests were charged with negligent homicide. At trial, the prosecution called doctors who testified clearly. Anneliese was not possessed. She was mentally ill, crushed by epilepsy, religious pressure, and a system that failed her. But here's the thing that keeps this case alive decades later: the recordings. During the exorcism sessions, her parents recorded the audio. The tapes are real. They exist. Researchers, journalists, and investigators have listened to them. and not one of them has been able to offer a comfortable explanation for what they heard on those recordings. Was Anneliese Michel possessed? Or was she a young woman who deserved medicine and was given prayer instead? Either answer should terrify you, because one means demons are real, and the other means we are the monsters. The grave of Anneliese Michel in Klingenberg still receives fresh flowers. Believers leave them as offerings. They pray at her headstone, convinced she was a saint who sacrificed herself. Her mother, to the very end, stood by the decision. She said, "I don't regret it. There was no other way." 3 films have been made about this case. None of them are as disturbing as the truth. If you want to hear what was on those tapes, and you need to decide right now if you actually do, that's something you'll have to search for yourself, because some things, once heard, cannot be unheard. It started with a smell, something rotten, something that had no business being inside a clean family home on a quiet street in Pennsylvania, and it never left. The Smurl family were not thrill seekers. They were not attention hungry. Jack Smurl was a production manager at a chewing gum company. His wife Janet was a devoted mother to 4 daughters. His elderly parents lived in the other half of their duplex. They were, by every measure, the most ordinary family you could imagine, which is what makes what happened to them so deeply, genuinely unsettling, because the thing that moved into their house wasn't invited, and it wasn't leaving. This is the true story of the Smurl haunting. And yes, the Warrens were involved. The Smurls moved into 328 Chase Street in West Pittston, Pennsylvania in August 1973, after a hurricane destroyed their previous home. At first, everything was fine, normal. The house needed some renovation work, but nothing unusual happened. Then, in 1974, the knocking started, banging on the walls, loud enough to wake the family at 3 a.m. No explanation, no pipes, no animals, no structural reason, just knocking. Then came the odors, a foul, suffocating stench that appeared in rooms without any source, hung in the air for hours, and vanished without a trace. Objects began to disappear. The television set burst into flames, with no fault found afterward. The walls developed stains that couldn't be scrubbed away, and one of the daughters was pushed, forcefully, down a flight of stairs by something no one could see. The Smurls contacted the Catholic Church. Priests came, blessed the house, and left. Nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. And then, the dark shape appeared. Family members began reporting a shadowy mass moving through the rooms. Not a trick of light, not a reflection, a solid, dark presence that drifted from room to room, radiating cold as it passed. Their German Shepherd, a large, trained dog, was picked up and thrown against the wall. The dog refused to enter certain rooms after that. By January 1986, the Smurls were desperate. On the advice of a friend, they contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren, the demonologists who had investigated the Amityville horror case and were, at that point, the most well-known paranormal investigators in America. Ed Warren walked into the house, said a prayer aloud, and commanded whatever was there to reveal itself. By his account, the temperature in the room dropped 30 degrees in seconds. A dark mass formed in front of him. The stench of rotting flesh filled the air, and then, on a mirror in the room, words appeared, spelled out in what looked like a mucus-like substance. The words said, "Get out." Lorraine Warren, a declared clairvoyant, identified 4 distinct entities in the house. 3 were human spirits. The 4th was something else entirely, a demonic force that was using the human spirits to mask its presence and feed on the family's fear. Multiple exorcisms were attempted over the following months. Each one seemed to suppress the activity temporarily, but the entity always returned. And then the attacks became personal. Jack Smurl reported being sexually assaulted by an unseen presence on multiple occasions. Janet was pinned down, physically harmed, unable to move or call for help. The activity didn't stay within the walls of the house either. It followed the family when they went on a camping trip to escape. Witnesses at the campsite reported hearing screaming from the Smurls' tent. The family returned home the next day. There was nowhere to run. Here's where this case gets complicated, and honestly, that makes it more interesting. Scientists and skeptics argued loudly that the Smurls were either hallucinating, lying, or both. A prominent paranormal skeptic called the whole thing a hoax. Neighbors grew hostile, some even threw bricks at the house, furious at the media circus that had descended on their street. And when the Smurls eventually moved away, the new tenants reported nothing unusual. But here's what the skeptics struggled to explain: the neighbors. Multiple people living near the Smurls reported hearing screaming and violent sounds from the house, even when the family was confirmed to be away. They weren't inside to create the sounds. They weren't performing for cameras. The house was empty. And the Warrens, whatever you think of them, produced hours of audio recordings from inside the property. Recordings of sounds that have never been fully explained. The family never profited from the haunting. They never wanted the publicity. They just wanted it to stop. In 1989, the Smurls moved out permanently. The activity reportedly ceased shortly after. Jack Smurl died in 2017, still insisting every word was true. The house at 328 Chase Street still stands in West Pittston. People drive past it. Some stop and take photographs. This year, 2025, The Conjuring: Last Rites brought this story to cinemas worldwide, the fourth and reportedly final film in the Conjuring franchise. Millions of people watched a dramatized version of what this family claims to have lived through. But none of those millions had to sleep in that house. If you've had your own experience with something you can't explain, something in a house, something that followed you, something that shouldn't have been there, leave it in the comments. Because some of the most terrifying stories I've ever read came from people sitting exactly where you are right now. It's time to die. Those words came from a 7-year-old boy. He said them to a nurse in a hospital waiting room in Gary, Indiana in 2012. Then his eyes rolled back in his head. And according to the official medical report filed that day, he was thrown across the room by a force that no one in that room could see. What happened next is documented in official government records by doctors, nurses, social workers, police officers, and a Department of Child Services caseworker who later quit her job because of what she witnessed inside that building. 800 pages of documentation exist for this case. 800 pages. In November 2011, LaToya Ammons, her mother Rosa Campbell, and her 3 children, ages 7, 9, and 12, moved into a rented home on Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana. They needed a fresh start. The house was affordable. The street was quiet. It seemed fine. Within days, the porch was swarming with flies. In December, in the cold, hundreds of large black flies covering the screen, dying, being swept away, and returning again the next morning, over and over. Then came the footsteps, always from the basement, always climbing the stairs, always stopping at the door. When Rosa got up to check, nothing was there. The door was locked from the inside. No one had come through. Rosa then saw something she described as a shadowy figure of a man, walking back and forth across the living room in the middle of the night. She assumed she was dreaming. She tried to convince herself it wasn't real. Then her children started changing. The youngest began speaking in a voice that was not his voice. Deep, slow. like something speaking through him rather than as him. He would stare at walls. He would not respond when called. And when he did speak, it wasn't in his words. On March 10, 2012, while the family was awake in the early hours mourning a relative's death, they watched LaToya's 12-year-old daughter levitate above her bed. She was unconscious. She drifted upward and then, slowly, came back down. She had no memory of it when she woke. In April, LaToya took the children to their family doctor, Jeffrey Onyukwu. At the clinic, in front of the doctor and his staff, the youngest boy was thrown through the air and struck the wall. Dr. Onyukwu later said he had never witnessed anything like it in 20 years of practice. A DCS caseworker named Valerie Washington was called in. She interviewed the 9-year-old at the hospital and watched as the boy, without any assistance, walked up the wall and onto the ceiling. He flipped over his grandmother. He landed on his feet. Washington filed her report. Then she quit the case entirely and refused to return. A Gary police captain named Charles Austin, 30 years on the force, drove to that house expecting a scam. He left a believer. Austin later said he had never, in 3 decades of law enforcement, encountered anything he couldn't explain. This case was different. He reviewed hundreds of pages of documentation and told reporters plainly something was happening in that house that had no rational explanation. A priest named Father Michael Maginot was brought in. He performed 3 separate exorcisms, 2 in English, 1 in Latin. LaToya convulsed through each one. The children, who had been taken into emergency custody by DCS, gradually began to stabilize once removed from the home. After the final exorcism, the family relocated to Indianapolis. They reported no further incidents. The house was left empty. In 2014, paranormal investigator Zach Baggins purchased the property for $35,000. He spent time inside it, filming a documentary. He later said that multiple people who entered the house during filming became ill or behaved erratically, including himself. He demolished the building in January 2016, but he kept pieces of the basement. He still has them. They are currently housed in his museum in Las Vegas. Skeptics argue the children were coached, that LaToya Ammons created a shared delusion and her children acted accordingly. A psychiatrist who evaluated the boys wrote in his report that the behavior appeared to be induced by the mother. But no one has explained how a boy walked up a wall in a hospital, in front of a nurse, a caseworker, and a doctor, in a building the family had never entered before. LaToya Ammons gave one final statement to the press after the story broke nationally. She said, "When you hear something like this, don't assume it's not real, because I've lived it, and I know it's real. The house is gone. The land it stood on is empty, but those 800 pages of documents exist. They are real. They are filed, and if you know where to look, you can read every single word." I'll link the original Indianapolis Star investigation in the description. Read it, then come back here and tell me in the comments what you think happened inside that house, because I genuinely don't know. And that terrifies me more than anything else about this story. Subscribe and come back next week, because we're just getting started.